Moderna's FDA request is broader than rival pharmaceutical companies Pfizer's request earlier this week for the regulator to approve a booster shot for all seniors. The company said it wants approval for all adults to provide flexibility to the CDC and medical providers to determine the appropriate use of a second booster dose. Moderna said its request for an additional dose was based on recently published data generated in the U.S. and Israel following the emergence of Omicron. The United Kingdom dropping all remaining COVID-19 travel measures today. The new measures allow travelers, regardless of vaccination status, to enter without a passenger locator form or negative COVID test. The updated measures come even as COVID-19 cases are rising across the UK. The number of cases up 48% from just last week. I'm Rich Barrabi in for Elizabeth Hashagen. Welcome to our live special report, The New Normal. Today we're talking mental health, with the pandemic increasing anxiety and depression for so many people. Joining us is DrLiz Matheis. She is a licensed clinical psychologist and certified school psychologist. DrLiz, thanks for being here.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good to see you again. Remember, we want to hear from you as well for the next half hour. We'll be getting your questions answered. We'll get them right to DrLiz, so submit those questions right now on the live stream of this show on our Facebook page. All right, DrLiz, we start there with the FDA now and Moderna asking for authorization for another booster shot. We're seeing new COVID numbers come out all overseas, but still somewhat concerning. What does that do to people who are ready to move on? They see those numbers, and look, a vast majority are going to say, we'll deal with it if it gets here, but many others are saying, this doesn't look good.
Well, I think they were triggering a lot of people because of the trauma, the PTSD we all suffered 2 years ago when the numbers were increasing outside of the United States, and all of us felt that we may be okay, but then that wasn't the case. So it kind of feels like we've done this already, and then maybe triggering old anxiety and triggering that time 2 years ago when we were all trying to make sense of what was really happening.
Yeah, so in the meantime, everybody's eager to get back to normal, and everyone's kind of trying to do that in their own way right now. How is that impacting our children? Obviously, you want your kids to be able to enjoy life as it should be, but it's an adjustment.
It's an adjustment for sure. Taking off the masks has, as I've seen it, resulted in an increase in social anxiety, learning how to interact with peers again, and in socially appropriate ways, how to handle, especially with teens who are already struggling with that piece of how do I stand, what kind of facial expressions am I making or not making. I know, hearing from my own children, other teens that I work with, a lot of them are saying, I can't make those facial expressions and hide them behind the mask anymore, so now I have to watch what I'm doing, which is somewhat comical, but it's really the truth, and the fact that it is creating some distress of, how do I handle myself in social situations when I think we've been slowly increasing the amount, but it's been a transition and learning how to go back to that former place. And remember, our kids are now 2 years older. That's a long time for a lot of our kids in their development. So where their developmental milestones were 2 years ago and where they are right now, it's a different place. And that development has kind of been hampered a little bit.
Do you think that many adults and parents may have taken it for granted that, kids will kind of just bounce back, they're resilient, they'll remember how to do this, and they'll be just fine?
I think you have a nice even split between the parents who are like, get back out there, it's going to be fine, you remember how to do this. And then your parents are like, keep your mask on, try to still keep your distance and be outside. I think that we're going to have a split, and everyone is going to transition very slowly and at their pace, depending on their fear level, given their experiences or past trauma.
So how important is it then for schools to be able to assess all children, regardless of where they are on that, mask or no mask? Are we in groups or are we not groups? They got to really watch out for everybody here.
It's a very tough situation. It kind of feels like no one's ever going to really be very happy with whatever the choice is. I think trying to be as flexible as possible during this transition time. It's been about 2 weeks. So it hasn't been that long that we've said, okay, let's try to go back to our former ways of living and being in school and socializing. So I think having the flexibility and the space to give our kids to transition in any way they need to understanding that it may be a seesaw type of effect, like, okay, I'm ready to open up and live in the world, and then someone gets scared because they heard of an increase in numbers, outside of the United States or even just in their community.
So, there's anxiety tied to this, but at the same time, this has to happen. This is really important. So how do you, kind of advise parents here who, on one hand, they want to give their kids space, but on the other hand, they want to help guide them through, which is somewhat of, if not uncharted territory, something none of us have been through over the past couple of years?
I think it's important for parents to understand their level of anxiety and what their goals are, and then to communicate that clearly to their children, because that is going to create a big foundation for our kids, right? So if we have parents who are super anxious, our children are going to feel that and respond similarly. So if a parent is feeling anxious, kind of getting that anxiety in check, understanding what's triggering their anxiety, and creating methods that are going to keep it minimal, because it will impact your children.
So what about for younger kids now? I'm talking, 3, 4, 5 years old, who are now just getting used to this brave new world. This is foreign to them, as strange as that may seem.
It is strange. Being around this many people may be intimidating for a lot of kids, toddlers who haven't done it. So my suggestion would be keep going out into the world, do it in small spurts of time as your child can tolerate, and then kind of withdraw and then come back and do it again. And to begin to desensitize our children and help them to tolerate being around more people and in social situations, or just even in going to stores.
Yeah, are you concerned that the younger children are going to have more anxiety in the future because they didn't have that interaction, say, in kindergarten, first grade over the past couple of years?
I think our younger children are very resilient, and it may be a rough start, but they'll work through it, and they'll get through it and develop the skill. As long as we're aware of it, we're acknowledging and validating how they feel, and then making those gains very slowly. I'm not a big fan of throw the child in the pool to learn how to swim. That doesn't tend to be my method, but to just do it in small increments and to build a tolerance and a comfort level.
Okay, so now let's talk about the older kids, teenagers, those who may be graduating soon. What are we looking for as parents or as guardians or just as loved ones for children who may be really struggling, even if it's not tied into the adjustments we're all making right now?
I think it's important to continue to check in and ask the question, how are you doing? How are you doing with this change? How are you adjusting? What are your fears? What do you like about it? Keep the lines of communication open, because our teens will give a parent an inkling, and sometimes they demonstrate it behaviorally. So I've been hearing parents who are calling me and saying, my child is telling me they feel sad for long periods of time and they don't understand why. Or they're feeling nervous when they're getting ready to leave the house or transition from school to home and home to school, or to an activity, to a friend's house, even doing social things that are fun. There's still some people are still feeling very anxious. Our teens, who those skills kind of went on the shelf for a little bit, but now we have to bring them out. So again, my thought is get out there in small spurts, practice, the skills that we work on, the strategies to help tolerate being in social situations, knowing how to tolerate them, and then come out again.
So where's that kind of line in the sand between everyday stress and maybe something more?
For me, it's when a child or a teen, a young adult can't function in any one of those domains. Not being able to function within the home, meaning can't get out of bed, or not showering, or working, completing homework and assignments, not socializing at all. At school is not being able to listen to a lesson and follow through on class assignments or participate in clubs or activities. The minute that functioning is impacted, to me, that's a time to intervene.
Okay, so now we move into springtime and things start to brighten up and warm up. Can that have a long-lasting effect on what we may see in terms of behavior and motivation and outlook, or is that just short-term here?
I'd say let's ride the wave for as long as we can, and absolutely get out there and have more interaction and more daylight hours and being able to be active and not have to be inside a home, or be limited. So take advantage of it as much as you can, do as much as you can, and let's see where this takes us into, the September.
Yeah, I mean, we hear so many parents talk about how they struggle now to get their kids to leave the home, put the video games down, put the devices down. That was an issue before COVID, but now coming out of it again, is this kind of like the impetus now to say, okay, we got to go outside, we got to get around people, let's have fun, let's be social again?
Let's go somewhere, let's do something, whether it's as a family, as with friends, with family friends, whatever it is, get out of the house. That would be my suggestion.
Family gatherings back open again for so many as well. So ultimately here, as we move through these next few months, do you think we will see a sea change for, some of our kids who may be struggling now, but they get to do this for a month or two again, barring any kind of crazy variants or that type of thing, come out of it on the other end and say, okay, let's go enjoy the summer. I feel like I'm myself again.
We can have some consistency in being able to be out in the world, and if we can have it for the next several months, I think that'll have a very positive impact, that even if things change in the fall, we will have had enough of an impetus.
All right, Dr. Liz Matheis, stay right there. Our conversation continues straight ahead. And remember, we want to hear from you. Submit your questions right now for Dr. Liz on our social media pages. We're going to take a look at those questions and get them to her so that she can get you some answers. You're watching The New Normal right here on News 12. We'll be right back after this. All right, welcome back. We are live on Facebook right now with Dr. Liz. The other thing, Dr. Liz, is, we're all watching what's happening in Ukraine, and I know it's a topic we've talked about too, but our kids really can't escape this now. I know we had spoken, you suggested, really making sure that you can monitor what they're saying and what they're, kind of embracing here on this. But, even in schools now, and rightfully so, there are drives to help people in Ukraine. So they're, I think, very keenly aware of the situation, if not all the brutal details.
I think, yes, trying to minimize the graphic exposure to our children who can't handle it makes a lot of sense. But again, there's so much that we can do as parents. So I think, again, checking in and letting your children ask you questions about what are you seeing, what are you thinking, do you have any thoughts or questions, and hearing their opinions, because you're right, it is a topic of discussion in school. And developmentally, you just want to hear what your child is taking in and absorbing. The younger children may have a very different understanding than a teen who can really understand the bigger details and the intricacies. So answer questions, ask your children if they have any questions, listen to what they're saying, listen to what they're hearing at school, because there's chatter about it. But I think it's important to hear what your child is hearing and what they're taking in.
Yeah, I would think that you want to have an understanding of how they perceive this, right? As opposed to maybe they're talking about it in school and you don't know what they're hearing.
Yeah, don't make any assumptions. I remember the conversation around 9/11 and what to tell kids, and my thought is always ask your child questions and answer their question and their question solely. Because their perspective and what they're taking away from it may be very different than what you think they are taking in, and we're taking it in on another level with all our our perspective and insight, and our children don't necessarily think in that same way. Some of our teens will, but at that point, again, you want to answer the question, keep it limited, so as not to instigate too much anxiety.
Right. Okay, Dr. Liz Matheis is our guest once again. So if you have questions, you're watching right now on Facebook for Dr. Liz, make sure you submit those questions, and we will ask her your questions right after this. Welcome back to the new normal here on News 12. I'm Rich Barrabi. Our guest today, DrLiz Matheis. She's here to take your questions as well. So again, if you're watching right now, you have a question for DrLiz, make sure to submit it right there on our Facebook page, and we will try to get you an answer. You know, before we get to some of those questions, DrLiz, I've been thinking also about a topic we really haven't been able to talk about much so far: inflation and the economy and the impact that can have on our children who may be seeing the stress that parents, loved ones are going through, even folks in everyday life who are really struggling right now.
I think it's okay to use it as a teachable moment and to understand that there's going to be limits on what can be spent as a family, and to understand that there's a budget and there are certain limits, because this is life and this is a part of daily life that our children are going to have to ultimately manage themselves. So to understand that this is not going to be the end of our, family life, and we're not going to lose our home, hopefully, but that this is an opportunity for us.
You've got inflation, you've got these big gas prices. I think it's a blow to everybody, quite frankly, psychologically and reality, looking at the bottom line, but that's where we stand right now. All right, let me ask you about this. A recent study showed more teenage girls with eating disorders are winding up in the ER during the pandemic. Is there a direct connection, do you think?
A lot of times our teens will control what they're eating because they feel out of control in other domains of their life, whether it's related to the pandemic or the residual effects or direct effects of the pandemic. Our children feel quite isolated. Friendships have changed, friendship groups have changed, and especially for our teens during those critical moments in middle school and high school, developing their identity. And yes, I agree that definitely I've seen an increase in the number of young women, young girls who are spending a lot of time on social media, looking at other females who look a particular way and realizing they don't, and really needing to help them understand that a lot of that is fine-tuned and changed, and very little or a lot.
So DrLiz, how do you get your children away from some of those images that are on social media that may really be having a lot of harm? I mean, you think about a chance where you try to get a break and relax. Oftentimes for our kids, and even for us, quite frankly, that's going like this, with the phone back up, back on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. How do you get them away from that?
I mean, there's two ways to approach this, right? To take the phone away, or to create screen time limits through their iPhones where it shuts down certain apps. But the other thing that I find to be even more important and helpful as a parent and a professional is to talk to our children and tell them and to share with them, what are you seeing? How is this impacting your image of yourself? And understand that a lot of this isn't real. Posts on social media are created to communicate an idea or a perception that may or may not be real. And that there's so much and there's so many levels to the social media world, but having that conversation to help them understand that people want you to perceive them in a certain way, so they create posts to communicate that and to convey that message, and understand that that's not always the truth. And you want to think about what is your truth and how you want to convey yourself in social media and remaining honest.
Yeah, on that same topic, you think about mental health days, right? And sometimes you just need a break. But many parents, especially if they're kind of old school, think if the kid's healthy, kid's going to school, right? Where do you stand on the idea of, maybe you let your kid kind of just slide for one day if it's really going to help them mentally?
Absolutely. We all need mental health days. We're all carrying a lot of information in our heads and emotions in our bodies. And if you need a day to just relax, then do it. There's no harm. And I think our schools are very understanding. And if you communicate what your child needs, and if you're worried about missed assignments, that's easy. That's easy to remedy. But acknowledging, and I think that's the biggest piece right there, acknowledging that you feel overwhelmed and you are going to take a day to recover so that you're refreshed tomorrow, is a very healthy message to give to our kids.
We've got a comment here I want to read to you from Danny, who writes, Long Island/New York stresses me out because it's too expensive to live here. So again, back to that topic of the economy, there's a trickle down between our kids and what we're showing them and what we are really feeling right now, right?
And it's important as parents to ground ourselves, check in with ourselves so that we're not spewing all of that into conversations with our children, or even messages that we may not realize are communicating anxiety and worry. If you're having those thoughts, share them with another adult out of the earshot of children, um, because our children need to understand we're the ones who are going to manage it as we are. They're not going to manage it. They're not going to go out and get an extra job at 5 years old to contribute to the household. I mean, that's just not realistic.
Yeah, that's for sure. But it is tough to keep those conversations, if not private, at least maybe away from earshot for the time being. But, hopefully we have better days ahead, as I think we're all kind of rooting for that on multiple fronts right now, and we will see how it plays out. Okay, Dr. Liz, stay with us, because when we come back, we're going to have your final thoughts on where we stand right now and how we can best be advocates for our children as they continue to move forward. You're watching The New Normal. It's a live special report here on News 12, and we are back right after this. All right, we're back on Facebook Live now. Thanks again to all of you who are watching here on a Friday. We do appreciate it. Dr. Liz, in terms of this economic angle to it, right? I mean, there are kids who may be hearing about it, and then there are kids who are really going to live the impacts of it. They're living it right now. That's a different scenario, right, than just hearing parents talking about it back and forth. That's a situation where maybe they don't have enough food right now, or maybe there are other things at play as, again, gas prices and prices on everything just continue to ramp up.
Agreed, and I think it's a source of distress to our children. But again, if we can, as parents, as much as possible, share those thoughts with another adult, but not with the child, and to not make comments that will create distress for our kids, because we really need to keep them out of it and let them be kids as much as possible, and then seek the resources that we need to meet our needs and meet our children's needs.
Yeah, I know it's a tough situation for all involved. Okay, if you're watching on Facebook, and we know you're feeling that as well, leave us some questions and comments for Dr. Liz. And so after this, we're going to have 2 minutes. And Dr. Liz, I'm just going to ask you your final thoughts on, how we can best advocate for our kids here, kind of keep that close eye on them as we continue to move forward. So that's coming up here in just a couple of minutes. Welcome back to our live special report, The New Normal. I'm Rich Barrabi, in for Elizabeth Hassagen. Dr. Liz Matheis is our guest, and she's been with us here throughout the half hour. And so, Dr. Liz, I want to give you this opportunity now to present a message to parents. And again, every case is different, and we understand that. But ultimately, how can they best advocate for their children? How can they best monitor their children in what are pretty unsettled times?
I think I'm going to sound like a broken record in saying, talk to your kids, ask them questions. Some questions that I like to ask are, what are your top 3 worries? And what are your 3 wishes? And that'll give you some insight into what your child is worrying about and wishing for and thinking about. that you may not have known. If you're worried for your child at school, and maybe they're manifesting that anxiety at school as well, again, reach out to your child's teacher, guidance counselor, let them know that this is happening so that they can have a safe space in the school as well to be able to go to talk to someone about what they're feeling in the moment and not having to wait until they get home. So creating a support system in multiple environments, I think, is really important, and letting your child know, if you're feeling this way, you can go speak to Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so. And sometimes that will relieve anxiety right there. But I can't emphasize enough, check in with your kids often, ask them how they're feeling, what they're worried about, what they're happy about, what changes are really having a positive impact on them, and what they're enjoying about the changes that are happening.
All right, we will have to leave it there. Dr. Liz Matheis, thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Remember, when news breaks, you can count on News 12 to bring it to you on the air, online, and on our mobile app. Thanks for watching The New Normal. I'm Rich Barrabi. Have a great rest of your day. All right, Dr. Liz, thank you so much.